parts of Africa, women and girls continue to face many challenges. Among them, limited access to healthcare and education, discrimination and gender-based violence. But there is hope. Despite hurdles, countless leaders and organizations across Africa are pushing forward, striving for equality and empowerment.
I'm very happy to be part of this Alliance for Women and Girls because I share the motivation and I share the importance to create this good environment for the development of girls and women.
With our work, we aim to build and support a network of leaders who are not only active but also impactful. We're focused on elevating their collective strength so they can make real change within their communities and beyond. Our strategy involves giving leaders the tools they need, backing their fight for social justice, and creating a space where they can share knowledge and resources.
When women and girls come together, they form a formidable force capable of driving regional and global change.
Challenges are real, but so is our strength and potential.
The gap between the need and possibility can be overwhelming, but we're not alone.
Together, we will dismantle barriers and create a lasting change.
We are deeply committed to building a connected and collaborative network that empowers every individual. Central to our mission is the belief in the transformative power of leadership. We recognize that systemic inequities can only be dismantled by nurturing the leadership potential within women and girls at all levels. The strength of our network lies in its unity and shared purpose. Our approach focuses on connecting voices, sharing knowledge, and pooling resources to amplify the impact of individual efforts.
With so much female talent out there, the need for an organisation that helps provide networked support has never been greater. And that's why AFWAG is here. So get involved.
Join us in our mission to elevate women and girls across the continent. With your support, we can turn the tide of change into a wave of enduring progress.
Good morning. What a pleasure to have you all here with us. Thank you for joining this side event, Accelerating Gender Equity Through Local Leaders and the Power of Networks. We have a fantastic program for you today. You will hear from an excellent panel. There is also a chance to network and equally ask reflective questions to the panel. Thank you very much. My name is Cynthia Appinting. I will be the MC for the day. A few housekeeping. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if you hear the sound, it is real. Please do go out through the side. Equally, the washrooms are downstairs on the first floor through the lift, and you will look to your right. So at this point, we want to have opening remarks from Dr. Vongai, who is the CEO for the Alliance for Women and Girls. Thank you, Dr. Vongai.
Good morning and welcome everyone. So first of all, I'm trying to adjust to my new norm. I think Faith, who's in the room, know that I hurt myself when I was dancing on the floor in Ghana recently, and I ended up having a major operation. But anyway, besides that, welcome so much. You know, today I'm so excited to have many of you in this room who have braved your sleep. This was sold out event, signed to the maximum, but as you can imagine, you are meant to be here. So can you say to the person next to you, thank you so much for supporting this movement. Right. So when I think about the theme for today, for me, this is deeply personal. So, because it's so personal and in terms of what we do at the Alliance, I grew up in Zimbabwe. I was born, bred, raised in Zimbabwe. In the community I grew up in, being a teenage mom was almost the norm. I think 2 of my sisters got pregnant by the time they were 13, 14 respectively, and I was on path to do that. And what shifted for me was coming in touch with some mentors and NGOs that were supporting women and girls in my community. That changed my whole trajectory to a point now where I incredibly say I ended up being of influence, not just in Zimbabwe, not just in my community, but across the world. But this reality has not been the same for many people. I went back to the community I grew up in 10 years ago. I wanted to say thank you to the people who had supported me, but I quickly realized that the 2 NGOs that were very instrumental had shut down. So on trying to explore what happened, I was told that I think for 2 of them, it had to do with leadership, burnout, and so many things. And then as I started talking with others in the area, I realized it wasn't just those 2 NGOs. About 10 NGOs at least that were supporting women and girls had shut down. So for me, my heart bled because I realized how many, I almost felt like other young guys then have been robbed about their livelihood. So on exploring this further and further, I realized there was a super common thread that many people who want to do good work in this field end up getting so burnt out, and then they end up not doing what they need to do. And right now, I think most of us were so fully aware that when we think about Africa, by 2050, Africa's population is set to double, and then of which the majority of that are women. And then when we look at all the other issues that are happening, from climate change, from issues around gender-based violence, for issues around education, the people who struggle the most on our continent are women and girls. And like recently I'll talk about when I was in another country, and sometimes when you see all these things that are happening, there are also so many leaders who are trying to advance and address issues affecting women and girls. And then the question I have is that, why are we not making the change we need? You know, recently I was talking to one of our network members, and they're saying every day they have to deal with at least 200 cases of gender-based violence. And so far they've had a reach of over 320 people. But this woman was saying, I am done, Mungai. I cannot do this anymore. I am tired. I've been operating for 8 years. I came to do this not because I knew how to fundraise, not because I wanted to be called the CEO, not because I wanted a name, but as the organization has grown, the expectations that are placed on me is something that I can't do. I feel isolated. I can't even be with other people because I have to do a day job. And this narrative is not just unique to Zimbabwe, and it's not just unique to those contexts where this partner is coming from, but it's almost like a movie playing over and over again across different parts of Africa. So to that effect, so one of the things that I was saying to someone yesterday is, sometimes it's painful when the people, the change agents themselves, become the victim. I always say, in quote unquote, when the people want to save or address some of these issues, are so overwhelmed without any support. And sometimes when you look at policies, rules, in most of our African countries, they are structured in such a way that they will not easily dismantle systemic injustices, especially for women and girls. And one of the things that we're obsessed with the Alliance is enough is enough. I'm sure some of you will agree that there have been so many conversations and spaces we've gone to which says, how can we advance issues affecting women and girls? But then what happens is, unless we go behind the leaders themselves, the organizations that are leading this initiative, we strongly feel that we will not achieve what we need to achieve in the long term. And when we talk about leadership, we're not talking about positional power. Yes, there is that. But there's so many elements around how do we ensure that as we address all these issues affecting women and girls, we are talking about leadership at all levels. From that young girl who's doing a pre-prep, thinking about what elements, what role can they play to address all these issues, to all these issues, I think, which are so multifaceted. Because one person was telling me that, okay, maybe unless we've got girls in the schools, we will not solve the problem. So while that helps, but for that girl to go to school, there are all those issues around their food. Are they feeling safe? There are so many issues. So one thing that I'm excited about the Alliance for Women and Girls right now is that, you know what, it's a network that's saying, we know what, we are obsessed with how do we ensure that leadership is at the center and at the heart of everything that we do across board. So I think you're going to hear a lot more today about what this is about. So we've got an esteemed panel that's going to be moderated shortly. But I'll hand over to the MC, because when I start talking about the Alliance, I could go forever. But hopefully, I'll share a bit more once we do the panel. So I'll hand back to the MC, but welcome and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vogai. And as she has said, enough is enough. Change is possible. Top marks go to who can guess what this building used to be. You will have a special gift at the back. At this stage, I want to introduce you to the moderator, and this is a lady who needs no introduction. Folawe Bikunle from Teach for Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to be moderating this very important conversation that we'll be having shortly. I'm Folawe Omikunle, born and bred in Lagos, Nigeria. And I like to describe myself as a social entrepreneur. I've worked most of my life in education, and I've committed myself to advancing quality education in Nigeria. Today, I will be moderating a very distinguished panel made up of champions and also advocates for gender equity. I'm looking forward to learning, and I'm also looking forward to this really engaging conversation that we'll be having. And so without further ado, I would like to bring on stage my panelists. I would like to invite Angela Nguku, founder and executive director of White Ribbon Alliance, Kenya. Welcome, Angela. I'd also like to call on Dr. Faith Nwangi Powell. She's the chief executive officer of Girls Not Brides. Karen Wakoli is the founder and executive director of Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa. And I'd also like to bring on the panel Francoise Modute, Chief Executive Officer, African Women's Development Fund. And of course, Dr. Vongai, who is also joining us, the founder of Alliance for Women and Girls. But I also just want to use this opportunity to say big congratulations and well done to you and your team for rallying around this very critical and important theme and topic. And to kick us off, I'd like to sort of frame this conversation. As we're all aware, in Africa today, a lot of attention and investment has gone into addressing gender inequity issues. And while a lot of progress has been made, the challenges persist. And it persists not because there are lack of ideas or efforts of leadership, but primarily because of the inability to sustain and scale these efforts at the pace and depth of the growing, evolving issues. And so today on this panel, we're hoping that we can have a fair and sound understanding of what it would take to harness the power of movement and networks to empower local leaders who are at the forefront of the efforts driving gender equity. And so our theme for this panel is accelerating gender equity through local leaders and the power of networks. To kick us off, I would like to have my panelists to share some thoughts that come to mind as they hear this theme. And I'd like to start from my far right with Angela. Over to you, Angela. Do you have a microphone?
Thank you. It's very interesting because when we think about networks, I go back to my rural community where I grew up. I'm a rural girl, and I call myself the rural girl. I grew up in rural Kenya. For those who are from Kenya, I grew up in Eastern Kenya, a place I grew up in abject poverty. And I say I'm a product of networks. My mom belonged to several networks, whether it was for going to the market to take the local produce, coming together as a network, coming together to make it a lot, because they used to produce little. So they would come together with a few women in the community to basically just see how to make it bargainable in the market. My mom used to do what we call today the table banking. So the little that they get, they would go put it together as a network of women. They would either buy utensils, buy food, buy different things, or take their children to school, or take their children for immunization and the like. So networks have existed within us. Now, coming up to where I am today, I've seen networks transform policies in our different places in the country, whether it's at the local level. I have seen networks run universities, for example, students coming together. By the way, I was a student leader, and through that networks and leading as a woman student leader, I saw university students who were women students coming together to ensure that their hostels were at par with the boys' hostels, because the girls used to stay in fabricated rooms and the boys used to stay in what are they called, concrete rooms and the like. So coming together to just sit enough is enough. So I can say just from there to where I am today, where I've seen young girls, adolescent mothers coming together to say we want to go back to school. We're forming a network to go back to school. We want childcare. We want to bring our mothers together to take care of these children as we go back to school. We want to advocate for ourselves. I've seen women and girls living disability coming together and say we want beds that are disability friendly in our institutions, and that has happened. I have seen many things, and civil society groups, small self-help groups coming together to say we want to be organized so that we can be able to drive change in my community. So yes, I have seen, and I am a product, and I still drive a network that is working to advance reproductive maternal newborn health rights, raising the visibility and the profile of the issue that has been left out for so long. I was actually sharing with Francois that for a long time, even when I go to women rights organizations and groups, they tell me, oh, maternal newborn health is not a women rights issue, and so it can't fit within the women rights network. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, at the end of the day, for me, I believe I've seen the power of networks. This network is driving change in my country and across the African and Asian continent, and I believe networks are powerful and they can actually drive gender equity. Thank you.
Lovely, amazing. Please share your sufficing thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Angela.
thank you.
Amazing. I think as a leader of one of the largest global partnership to end child marriage, I have seen in real life, in real time, how the power of collective action can bring change. If we want change, if we want to accelerate the change we want, it's the power of the people at the forefront of the issues we are dealing with. And I have seen that. So I've just come back from Guatemala literally a week ago, and I was so amazed by young girls, 17-year-old girls, coming together as a network of adolescents saying, we want to be the change you are seeking. And that is the power we are looking for. So for me, the message I have is that networks are important, but we need to invest in them. They cannot work without funding. They cannot work without support. And the need is right now. I was in CSW in March, and I was saying this is the 7th time I have been to CSW. And I was saying, how long are we going to have this conversation? How long are we going to continue talking about rights of women and girls? When do we actually stop and do something else? We need to stop, and I've seen the power of networks really driving that change at the local level. So for us, is to pull from the back and let the people at the front of the issues lead, because they know where it hurts, they know the solutions, they know what needs to be done, and they have done it, and we are seeing amazing success, which we are going to share at the course of this conversation.
Thank you very much. Karen, over to you.
Okay. Wow, thank you so much. A number of times, whenever I encounter people, mothers, fathers, and I ask the question, and especially for those who have daughters, I ask the question, what dream do you have for your child? Many of them say, oh my goodness, I want my daughter to be everything she wants to be. I want no limitation whatsoever. I want her to be the president. I want her to be a great entrepreneur. I want her to pursue her passion and purpose and dreams and achieve that and make a mark in this life. Then I ask the question, okay, so what are you doing in your place of work? What are you doing in your place of worship? What are you doing at dinner tables, or even along the roads or paths or supermarkets and stuff to actually make sure that your daughter, because I realize that sometimes we look at challenges as removed from us. But when we bring them closer to us, when it hits home, you're like, no, I have to do something. I need to create a pathway. And so I asked the question, so what are you doing in your workplace to make sure there are no barriers preventing the women and the girls in the workplace or in the learning institutions, in schools, in the places you're in to actually advance and pursue purpose and be the best they can be? They're like, oh my goodness, okay. I mentor 1 or 2, and I'm like, okay, so how are you then planning to institutionalize this to make sure that maybe tomorrow you're not in this organization, the culture will be there to make sure women get promoted, to make sure women are empowered, to make sure there are men for women, women are respected and all that. And such conversations go on, but it's always interesting for me that a number of times we are removed from this conversation till we say, what do you want for your daughter? What do you want for your girl? What do you want for your partner? And then we say, okay, let me take action. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I totally believe in that. It talks about the fact that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights and must act towards each other in a spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood. Dignity is really core. It's really key. Vongai talked about leadership being the cornerstone or the foundation to accelerating gender equity everywhere through leadership and localization and all that. I really believe in that, and I have many stories to tell concerning dignity and why I believe in this. And dignity is for every man, woman, child, any human being on earth. I see some key things that then would drive towards that to then actually even accelerate this further. Like I feel like there's an urgency. We cannot wait for 100 years, for 50 years, for 10 years to actually achieve gender equity, because then as a society we're missing out. Look at during the COVID season when some of the nations that tackled the SCAD very well successfully, they were led by women. So just imagine what would happen to the globe if we had many more women in leadership. Yeah, like what would happen? And so let me just talk quickly about the key things that then drive dignity and would accelerate gender equity. Number 1 is love. When you love, you do not judge. When you love, you want the best for the person or for humanity. So leadership that is driven by love, I find it to be so critical, and empathy, whether it's by women, by men, by any person within the society. Number 2 is awareness. Sometimes we do not do or we do not have because we do not have the awareness. And so it's important that each and every one of us, the work we do, the work of our organization, that it's actually critical in creating awareness for people to take action. Because when we know better, we become better, and therefore we do better. And awareness can be created through leadership development, the coaching, the mentorship, which is the work we are doing at Emerging Leaders.
Back to you on that one, but thank you so much for sharing so passionately. Francoise, I would really like to hear what is on your mind when you hear this theme.
Thank you so much. When I heard the theme, I asked Funkai, are we going to talk about networks only? I'm somebody who believes very strongly in networks. Actually, I'm so glad to share a stage with Faith because I was part of the founding team of Girls Not Brides. I'm a huge believer of networks. And as I've grown to work with networks, coordinate networks, I've started to ask myself the question, what is the glue that brings the members of the networks together? And for me, this is what we need to invest in. What keeps us together? And this is where I started to evolve my thought from networks to centering movements, not just networks. First, because centering movements requires for all of us to look at who is not at the table, right? And we usually use established networks with people who are like us, do the kind of work that you do. You have networks of NGOs and networks of whatever it is. So that's the first thing. And then one guy asked me, what is the difference? What is the difference between a network and a movement? So I want to very briefly share a definition that we use at AWDF because we have a movements-oriented strategy. And we borrowed this definition from a South Asian scholar, feminist scholar called Srilata Baltiwala, in a document she created for CREA, the organization called All About Movements. And what she explains, and I'll read this, is a movement is a set of people with a shared experience of injustice who organize themselves to build the collective power and leadership, develop a shared agenda for change which they pursue through collective action with some continuity over time. So for me, I think it's very important. It's been really a driving definition for me, because what it means that feminist movements, first they recognize the patriarchy as one of the core systemic issues. So they go to the root, first thing. The second thing that they do is that they are by us, for us, with us, right? And I think we have all been part of movements. We don't need to be established as an NGO. If you look, for example, one of the movements that have really transformed, I think in the past few years for us, is the Me Too movement. For example, where we realize that your grandmother is in movement as well as your cousin, as well as, and they don't do this work in the way that we do. So I think it's something about us, this movement is from us, for us, with us, by us. And so I think this, so as I speak today, I will come from a place of looking at movements, not just networks. And I also want to acknowledge Tawana Burke in the back there, founder of the Me Too movement, because this is really what we learn from. So.
Amazing. Movement and not networks. And I think your point around the fact that what is the glue that brings together the power of network takes me to my next question, and which is to Angela, because I think about your work in women's health and women's rights. And of course, you've experienced the power of network. If there's anything that everyone shared and echoed on this panel, it's really that you have experienced the power of movement and network. And so what would you say it would take for a network to feel truly co-created and owned by local leaders who are advancing gender equity? And perhaps you might also want to share an example of what you've seen and how you've seen it work.
That's a very good question. And I say it's a good question because it's coming at a place where the White Ribbon Alliance network, or now movement, actually it's a movement, it's not a network, claimed back its power from the Secretariat. I say that because this is a movement that was founded 25 years ago. In fact, in November, we'll be celebrating our 25 years of autonomous movements that have formed at country level and then coming together to decide, let's have a shared agenda. We have a shared agenda, we have a shared passion and everything. It would be nice to be coordinated from somewhere, because again, we are not forgetting that we thrive. We are operating in a place where donors dictate how you need to look like. You need to be organized, you need to have a secretariat, you need to have a channel where the money is channeled through for you to be able to operate. And so we came together and decided, let's have this secretariat based in DC, again, because where the power is. I was telling for Lawe that a lot of times when we talk about power, we forget power is money. A lot of times we need just to call it as is. And as such, for many years, we were coordinated, affiliated from this place. And then reached a place where leadership changes and everything. And the people sitting there like, there's a lot of money that's coming in. Why not keep it here? Why not monetize it and everything else? And so the movement came together and said, we're not interested. And so last year in April, when the Secretariat came together, and the Secretariat was really a few people, 6 people sitting in America, somewhere in DC. And we said, you know what? We're not interested in you coordinating us, because what we see is that you've started practicing what we don't preach as a movement. You started practicing tokenism, where you get millions and you get to the movements across Africa and Asia, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. And anyway, that happened. And for me, what am I learning from? What I learned from that and across board and across the movement, as I've seen it evolve over time, is that until you keep that shared agenda and the values remain shared for the time that you're there, you're not going to go anywhere. Movements are very hard to run. I say that having founded the one in Kenya and belonging to other movements and the like. And when you have a shared agenda, you have a shared feeling. And most importantly for me, it's movements being led by the people in the front lines. Until you wear that shoe and understand and acknowledge what it feels like to be married off when you're young, to be an adolescent mother, to go through postpartum bleeding like I did when I was giving birth, you'll not be able to understand why it's important to keep that movement together. And I think for me, movements, or rather networks, let me use Francois' definition, because for me, movements are more powerful because it's the passion, it's a fire in your belly that keeps that going over and over again. And we need to bring people together to have a shared vision, a shared values, shared principles of how you're going to operate, where you're going to operate, what are the issues that you're really going to be addressing, and everybody needs to subscribe to that. When one of them comes in from a very, what can I call it, because I'm learning from what I've seen across board. When you come from an idea that I'm coming here to make money out of it, I'm coming here to shape my own narrative, to make a legacy out of it, you're not going to go anywhere. Now, coming down to now the real work that I'm doing at the country level and now at the African level, I have seen the network of women who have experienced issues in childbirth, who have had mothers who have experienced issues in childbirth, who have lost their mothers as a result of childbirth, deaths related to childbirth, come together and decide, you know what, we can actually make a difference. And I think earlier I said, I've seen women coming together. Let me just say something. A lot of times when we start, when you hear there's a movement, people think, oh, I can actually just join in and run. Oh, it's women, so women are the same. Women are homogeneous, and so let's run that way. I keep telling people, and mostly donors, mostly policymakers, and the like, women are not homogeneous. Women are heterogeneous. We have adolescent mothers in the group that I work with. We have women living disability. We have nomadic women who move from place to place. We have women who are rural poor. Women who are illiterate, and all these women turn out to be mothers in one way or the other. So it's about bringing the different aspects and the different issues that women are going through to really understand and drive the agenda themselves. And so at White Ribbon Alliance, we use an approach called the Ask, Listen, Act approach. One of the powerful things I've learned is that you must ask women and the people that you're working with, what is the issue? Don't prescribe. I've seen a lot of people prescribing from the top and saying, this is the issue we must address, this is what is facing women. They need ambulances, we need that. Listen to women and listen to these networks with that desire, deep desire to understand the issue and prioritize with them as I tell you what their issues are. Don't listen from the place of, I want to respond. I know your issue, I'll plug in, this is it. And then from there, please act with them. Let them set the priorities and then act with them. That way you are going to drive the agenda for these people further and deeper. And for me, when people come together with their shared vision, shared issue, shared agenda, at the end of the day, change does happen, and I've seen it happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm going to come to you, Dr. Faith. And really, Angela has shared a lot around the fact that first, movements are very hard, but then she shared a few principles around what enables and what drives success. You have been part of several transformative movements, and I'm curious to hear of an example of any of the movements that you've been part of, where you have seen sort of frontliners taking leadership, and where you've seen shared vision truly really happen. Just share an example of that movement that you've been part of that exhibits all of those principles and why it happened.
Thank you so much. I will maybe just to set a bit of a background. Girls Not Brides is a global partnership of about 1,600 organizations across 100 countries. So the way we work is that we go into countries and look at countries where we have many members. For example, in Uganda, we have 106 members. In Guatemala, we have 58 members. In Mozambique, we have 86 members. So we look at these countries and encourage them to create local movements, to say the only way you can work together is to be local movement, really having collective action together. Right now, we have about 44 movements, national partnerships, and coalitions in 44 countries. And these movements are the people who really drive local change. They work together to lead what is needed in their own countries. But what unites us, to start with your question, is what we call our theory of change. We have worked together as a movement to agree what are some of the pathways we can use to end child marriage. So within that theory of change, we have agreed these are the different pathways we can use. So we are not prescribing, we are telling you these are the different ways you can end child marriage. Choose what works for your context. Then within that, we have created what we call a partnership strategy. We call the partnership strategy as the canvas through which change happens. Again, this is not prescriptive. We always say this is something we have co-created with our members, and it's up to them to choose what is their niche, what is their competence, what is they can do within that partnership strategy. And within our own, as the Secretariat, we have said, how can we add value to what our members are doing? So what keeps the movement going is because we have a shared vision, we have a shared destination, our journey is the same, we are going to the same direction. And I always give the example, today we all came here, but we did not follow the same journey. Some of us took the bus, some of us walked, some of us got a ride, some of us maybe drove themselves, but we got here because we knew this is where we were coming. I don't say because you took a bus, your journey was not great. I took a bus and it was amazing. I don't say that you walked, your journey wasn't great. The point is that we are all here. So that is the point of our theory of change as well, that we know the destination, take the journey which works for you. Take the tools which work for you. Then the other thing is the partnership strategy which unites us. Then we also say that we do not expect our partners, our members to work without money. So in 2019, we introduced the financial investment support for those coalitions and support, and we told them, we don't have a lot of money. We are not a big funder. We are not coming with big money. We said, we have a small cake. We are going to share with you. But the way we are going to share with you is to co-create with you, to come to your country and say, so what are your priorities within this canvas of strategy? What are your priorities? Let's co-create. And once we co-create, we create a budget and we share our budget with you. So we are not funding you, we are just sharing our cake. Because we don't want people to think we are donors. We are just investing in the members we work with. And that really drives change, because I'm really so tired when people tell me that people can end child marriage with volunteers. I don't agree with that. I think we need to invest, because I have a salary, I'm not doing this for free. Why should I expect anybody else to do it for free? So it's very, very important that we really invest in that. So we invest with our members. But we also come together to evaluate. What are the challenges for your journey? Did the bus break down? How can we fix that? How can we learn from the person who did a different journey? So we learn, and then when we learn, we do capacity development. So we continue to learn together. So we see it. And one of the other things we believe, and I'm really very happy you called me the CEO of Girls Not Brides, and I feel very proud, because I know I'm just not the only CEO of Girls Not Brides, because we believe that everybody within the movement is a leader. We believe that this movement needs to be leaderful. Everybody needs to feel they have a stake in it. So it's not me telling people, because I'm the big CEO, I've arrived now, everybody needs to listen to me. No. We are all leaders. You are leaders within your own circle of influence. And when people know their own value, what they bring, that they are valued, they are considered, they are listened to, then they stay on the movement. That is a value. And the final thing, because I know we can keep talking, one of the examples I can tell you is Uganda, where has been our flagship project. In Uganda, we have an amazing, amazing movement there. And some of the successes they've been able to do is to get the government to agree to endorse a national strategy for ending child marriage. They have also had a parliament allocate some funding for child marriage. They have also had religious leaders come together and say they want to learn how they can end child marriage. They have involved the youth to come and say we want to be the future without child marriage. To me, that is success. We call it building the ecosystem of change. So everybody, from the top government to the girl in the village, they are all involved in that process, and everybody knows their circle of influence.
Fantastic.
It's important when people feel valued. That is why people stay.
Could you give us an idea of how long this success has taken to happen?
This success, Uganda was actually, the good thing of me is that you heard Francois saying that she was part of the founding members of Girls Not Brides. So I also ride in the success of others. Uganda actually started before my time. I joined Girls Not Brides in 2019, but Uganda as a movement was formed in 2016. So it has been a long journey, and I think that is what we don't have sometimes, the patience. We have to have the power of stay with the issue. issue. You have to be patient. You have to listen. And that's what I keep telling donors. And if there are donors in this room, we have to really invest smart. We don't give a year grant and expect now that we will end child marriage. This, we have to be in it for the long haul. We have to be patient. We have to negotiate. Sometimes COVID comes, things roll back. Sometimes climate change comes, things roll back. But we cannot give up. We have to be able to pivot, to be flexible, to look at how can maybe today, the bus broke down, and you know my analogy of the bus, maybe it broke down because of something. Let's look for the train that broke down. Let's look for the bicycle. We have to be so innovative. And I think resilience. And that is why I think having that leader for movement, knowing that you are not the only person waking up every morning thinking about this issue, having other people thinking about this issue, it builds your resilience. Because if it's only me who is thinking, oh, now COVID has come, what am I going to do? Now it's climate change, what am I going to do? I'll burn out. Somebody talked about burnout. But for me, I don't burn out because I think I have 1,600 leaders I can call and I say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? There is COVID in Nepal. What do we need to do? So that is how we build success.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think on top of what you have shared around, shared destination, shared vision, you've also talked about the need to invest even in the network, in the movement in itself. And so before I come to you, Karen, I want to quickly come to you. And that is also because you're known to, and your organization is known to really approach funding in a localized manner. And so it'd be good to hear you share what is your thoughts, what has your experience been to have philanthropy really funding in a localized manner?
Thank you for the question. I know you will be sick of me challenging the questions. I don't like the word localization at all, because they tell us who's local, right? When we talk about localize, I never hear about localization in the US. Are there no locals in Washington, D.C.? So sorry, I'm just going to say that. I'm still going to stay within the framework of the conversation. I'm not trying to mess things up. I just want to challenge a little bit the frame. I will, however, share how the African Women's Development Fund is a model, a very interesting, it's a 24-year-old fund, right? So for me, it's such a privilege, as Faith said, to follow in the footsteps of 3 amazing feminists from Africa who went, in global discussions and said, look, there's no money for us here. Not because there's no money anywhere, it's because the money is not for us. And the money is not for us because there's nobody who's making this money to be for us. And there's only us who can do this for ourselves, right? So this is really the origin story of AWDF. And for me, what I'm really learning from this is that we need to be intentional about having not just movements who get funding from outside, is to have money that is transformed, as long as we don't have money by us, because let me tell you, African philanthropy is not doing what it needs to be, okay? So we raise the funding internationally. That being said, being not a donor to the movement, but being the funding arm of the movement, I think is what makes a difference for us. What that looks like in terms of, let's use the word localizing philanthropy by AWDF, I just shared 2 or 3 very quick things. One is, as I said, funding from within the movements. We are feminists from the movements working in a philanthropic organization. That means that we understand the limitations, we understand the priorities. So when a donor comes to us and say, well, we want to give you money to do grant making, but we insist that your grantees fill timetables so that we know we can track when they're working on the project. We're like, we can't take that money in these conditions because the Association of Women Selling Tomatoes in Marché Central in Douala will not fill a spreadsheet for you. I'm not going to lie to you. You either change your restrictions or you take your money back, right? If we are for movements, we know that these aunties are not going to, fill that spreadsheet. Coming from movements shapes the money to make it as clear, as close as possible. to the needs. It's not always possible, right? Because there's a lot of restrictions, but our role is to absorb as many of those restrictions. The second thing I will say is that we co-create the strategy with the change makers themselves, right? Our strategy is an outcome of a long, deep listening exercise. And so we have to do that together. Not just consultation, but really co-creation. That means every draft, we had a group of fantastic, phenomenal feminists who really checked us. They didn't just check the draft, they checked us. They were like, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And it allows us to know and feel confident that our strategy is responsive to the needs of movement and that we build in the agility, to respond to, as Faith said, COVID, climate change, people trying to repeal the laws criminalizing FGM in the Gambia. We thought we'd secured that. We thought we had secured that, so we need to continue. Lastly, I think philanthropy, as we're looking at it from us, for us, it needs to do more than moving money. Money is essential, right? I mean, I work in a fund. That's basically, as I tell my kids, my job is get the money in, get the money out. But we have to do a lot more. So, for example, when we look at our work that we do, yes, we have the funding, the accompaniment. We build in also work to strengthen the agency and the resilience of the organizations. And so I'm very interested in the work of the Alliance because of the focus on leadership. Like we have some programs like year-long accompaniment and coaching for leaders, for their boards, etc. It just needs to be built in. We have what we call knowledge and voice, amplifying the knowledge, amplifying the voice, so that we should not be told what impact should look like. We have the knowledge, we have the experience, right? And our experience is as valued as expertise of people in Harvard University who should tell us what, We lastly, and I want to go back to the glue. We must invest in the glue. I completely agree with everybody here that we need to have shared vision. We have to have common. But I think we also need to make sure that we have solidarity. We have care. And solidarity and care is not, and it cannot be the byproduct of us having collective action and collective vision. We must invest in the togetherness. We must invest. So AWDF, for example, has programs where we bring leaders together for a retreat, a care retreat. There's no agenda, but be well, rest well, eat well, all of these things. It's expensive, and nobody wants to fund it because where are the log frames, right? So I just want to say that we know the burnout, and that's why we know we have to do this work. So my point is philanthropy cannot just be funding. And philanthropy must invest in what keeps movements together. Because when we are well, I can be burnt out and not be guilty because I know as I take care of myself, somebody else is doing the work, right? So we must be together. And when I'm burnt out, nobody else but a sister who's doing this same work knows, why I'm burnt out and how I get out of it. So invest in the glue is what, for me, makes a difference between a network and a movement.
Fantastic. Wow. Amazing, amazing responses and reflections from the panelists. And we're going to get to the audience. I'm sure some of you have burning questions. So if you could just take note, because I have 2 more questions to ask, and then we'll come to the audience. Karen, investing in the glue. And your work really surrounds, really investing in empowering, equipping, building capacity of local leaders that are at the forefront of gender equity. How would you say that has amplified the work and the impact that you've seen in the space where you work in?
Thank you very much for that question. Let me start off by touching on the bit about power that Angela and Dr. Faye talked about. That there's power in the money. There's also another very powerful power and force, and that is finding oneself. And finding oneself takes lots of reflection, lots of doing inner work. And I realized, just like many of us are talking about the burnout, the fatigue, and all that stuff, that when leaders are well, they do well. When leaders are wounded, when leaders burn out, when leaders are fatigued, they hurt the people they lead, and the work is not sustainable. The movement cannot, be sustained. So part of what we do as we nurture values-based leaders in Kenya and across the continent is that we go through something called storytelling to find, what is my story? What is my journey? Do I own my story? If not, how do I get to then own my story? Because our lives in a big way are shaped by the narratives we tell, the stories we tell. But can we tell our stories in a way that empowers us, in a way that gives us power, in a way that enables us to take back our power and walk in our power as leaders, as women in leadership? Because then there are people who will get to grow and pursue their dreams and purpose and just be the best they can be and influence, not by getting into contact with us, but by just observing and watching. That is another channel, leading, through example. Now, let me talk about one particular program that we run, several programs in just nurturing leaders, and there's been lots of impact over the period of the last 12 years that we've been in existence. There's a program that is called the Public Service Emerging Leaders Fellowship Program that is in partnership with the government. We nurture ethical, citizen-centric leaders within the government system, young women and young men. And at some point, when we launched this particular program about 3 or so years ago, some young women called the day before the launch of the program, and they said, "I'm sorry I can't come to the program. Please, fill my slot with somebody else." So when we inquired, many of them, 3 of them said, "I'm a lactating mother and I would need to travel with my child and my help. And so usually, government cannot pay for this unless you guys will pay for it. It's obvious. You may not. And so I'd like to give my slot to somebody else." And yes, it is true, we did not have budget set aside for that, but we sat down with government and other stakeholders to say, so what do we do? This equitable access, that when this young woman accesses this program, gets to do the inner work and the personal development and gets to network with other leaders, something happens. They get to grow, they get spurred to the next level of impact and influencing and of actually systems change. But when they're left out because they're lactating mothers, that doesn't make sense. So we decided to cut out on other things in the budget and make funds available for the lactating mothers and persons with disability who are also in a way disadvantaged. And the following years, actually, government set aside the money for any such eventualities. And we thought, wow, this is really powerful, because then, it wouldn't be proper to disadvantage the young women who would want to come into the program. And let me also just talk about systems change in government. Nothing scales like government. And the work that all these partners do, government, civil society, private sector, and all other entities that get to do the work we do, that work is so critical. For government in particular, government impacts lives and citizens on such a big scale. Issues around healthcare, issues around access to education, food security, things that are core, they hold the social fabric of society together, are so critical. And so I feel like we need to invest more in having governments deliver for people, in having government ensure there's better service delivery, effective service delivery, citizens feel seen, citizens feel heard, women are included in top leadership and at all levels, of government and of service delivery. That is really critical. Yeah, and part of also what we do in all our programming is ensuring that we have intergenerational engagement. Younger women, older women, younger men, older men, and also just having men be mentored and we get to deconstruct the whole gender stereotypes, and we get to work together arm in arm, and men support the women, women support the men. We work together as partners. That intergenerational engagement is also key. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Karen. And I'm going to come to you now, Vangai. And, a lot has been shared around, the importance of the glue, the importance in investing in not just the network, but actually building a sustainable movement. And I'm keen to hear about what AFWAG is doing differently to invest in this glue, to strengthen it, to fix and come together and share experiences when the bus breaks down? What is it that AFWERG is doing differently to really nurture and build a lasting movement?
No, thank you so much, Folawe. So first of all, like Francois, I'll start by saying I'll avoid the word fix because it then lives into the power dynamics. So one of the things that I said, I think when I shared my opening remarks, was that we strongly believe in the power of leadership. I think Dr. Faith said earlier on, when COVID hit, so many things happened. Because sometimes we say if we're not careful, all these initiatives around gender interventions can just focus a lot more around how can we teach you to have either women in STEM or whatever. So while that can drive the needle, for me, I strongly believe that what will shift the systems is the investment in leadership. So if I break that down about what I mean, so when COVID happened, some of the network partners we work with, for example, in education, because everybody, like in Africa, most places, like in parts of Africa that we operated in, had no access to broadband, to data, to any of that. And everybody else was saying kids can learn from home. So some of the network partners in Nigeria, what they did is they came together at a local level. They started talking to priests, to mosques, to all sorts, and say, can we have your microphones so that we can do lessons in the public spaces? They started coming together like people would never work together, because for me, that's what I call leadership. But leadership doesn't teach you to comply. Leadership teaches you to adapt. So for me, I strongly believe that unless and until we invest these movements, these networks in the leadership capacity, we will end up being so helpless. Because I think what COVID taught us is that we can never have definitive solutions to anything. So I think for me, that's one thing that, for example, we strongly believe in. And at the Alliance so far, with 3 initiatives around the leadership, because one, we realized that most of the books and literatures around leadership was driven from the West. So while we talk about locally rooted and globally informed, so we are going on an expedition with Women Emerging, where we are having women come together and say, you know what, there's no manual around leadership. What does leadership mean for you as a person who is in Makoko, selling tomatoes, right through to someone who might be a Francois who's sitting in a nice cushy office in Togo. Yes, right? And everything else in between. And what does that mean for me? When I migrated to UK some many years ago, I came from being a bright star in Zimbabwe to almost looking like a fool, because my way of doing things, my way of thinking, and what had shaped me was radically different. And one of the things that I worry about is that if we are not careful, even when we talk about some of these buzzwords around capacity building and all these things, they are feeding into things that are perpetuating some of these injustices. And I know recently I was talking to Francois when we talked about how do we also invest even in the leadership of young girls, because most of the movements and networks, they focus a lot on CEOs, founders, and people with positional power. But for us, we've seen in our work, for example, there was this young girl that I'm going to call, I'll call her name. Her name was Esther. So Esther grew up in a community where her father died when she was about 2. And then when the mother died when she was about 2, her father was absent in her life. She grew up in a community where teenage pregnancy was very ripe. By 12, you could almost predict that 90% or more of the girls would be pregnant. But because there was an NGO that saw her, that saw the leadership in her, they invested in her such that now, if you fast forward many years later, not only was Esther shortlisted for the coveted Africa Leadership Academy, she contributed in a chapter in a book called The Leadership We Need Now. And not only did she did that, she wrote a proposal that won laptops, like computers for her school, and she put her school on the map, right? So when you talk about leadership, it could have been easy to say to her, let's send her on a STEM course or whatever. She would have done well for herself. But when you talk about movement, when we talk about like the networks and the power of investing in leadership, it felt like that investment in one Esther has led to shifts in that particular community. Now girls are seeing what's possible, and it has been redefined for them. So when we talk about some of the work that we're doing, is about how do we also invest in the young people? Because when you go to anywhere, there's NGO, where there's incubators, etc., most of the emphasis is how do we train you so that you know how to fundraise money, you have to have your structures and system in place and governance, etc. So why is that so important? For me, the question that we're obsessed with at the Alliance is, how do we ensure that there's leadership at all levels so that people can easily turn lemons into lemonade? Then the last thing that I would just talk about, when I think about also the theme around power of networks and etc., I would almost say one of the things that I'm struggling with of late, when people talk us, well, guy, how can we help you? We are driving this localization agenda. For me, I think we're talking about localization agenda. Who defines localization? And what do you mean by localization, right? Because, different things will mean different things. And then I'm always told, okay, we've created a seat on the table. Like last year, I was at the UN General Assembly. I was on a couple of panels talking about localization, and I was the only person from the communities. So what I always challenge is I say, you know what? It's one thing for you to create a seat for me on the table, but give me the microphone so that I speak for myself and for my experience, which is what these guys are talking about. So when we think about the power, the convening power that we have as the Alliance is, we're bringing people together and say, hang on, when we share our shared realities, our shared experience, we give each other confidence in a way that was not possible. And what I said in my opening remarks was this particular network member of the Alliance who was saying, when she started talking with others, she realized, I am not alone in this, and I can do something about it. So I think that's what I can say around your question.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. You all agree with me that this has been such a powerful panel discussion, really insightful and informative. And I want to welcome any questions, reactions, or comments that might be, okay, I have a hand up. Oh, great. Another one. This is really good. Okay. My colleague is coming.
Thank you very much.
So if you could share your name and your organization and then your question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Sierra. I am an industrial designer from Colombia, and I have the privilege to work in Mozambique. I just want to reflect on something that everybody has been talking here is about investment. Our company works in menstrual health, and we were very products focused until COVID, where we actually were given the challenge by the government of Mozambique to educate 300,000 adolescents in body literacy and menstrual health and education. When I was given this task, I said, how I'm going to reach out 300,000 youth? The first thing I did was I turned into Activistas Mozambique, which was a movement that was already put together. And I tap into that network, into that movement to recruit 120 young women between 18 to 25 to be the ones at the front lines to educate these kids. But the point that I want to make is the need to recognize the work of the activist. Because one of the huge problems that I had was to convince the donor that people better have salaries. That you cannot put the burden to go and educate all these kids into the backs of an activist because they're supposed to be volunteers. So that was a huge fight that we picked, and it really made a difference. Because when you really equip someone who has all the drive with the economic resources to go and do the job, it's a complete game changer. They need airtime, they need transportation, they need to eat, but you also, by giving them a salary, you dignify the work of the volunteer. Because at the end, they're social workers. So I think it's extremely important for us to make sure that when we talk about investment, it's also like the monetary investment for this person to go around and do the work. And thank you. I mean, this has been super inspiring.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Stella Bosire. It's really lovely to see my colleagues and in the movement. My question is very short. Lots of the time, and Vanga, we've had this conversation with your followaway, is around investment in women's wellness, from individual to communal care. Where is the money?
where is the follow the money? I'm going to. I will start with you, Francois. Yeah. So and then okay, and Angela also would like to add to that. Yeah, make a comment. Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Where's the money? First of all, there's something that I learned from coming into philanthropy. I thought there was no money. There is so much money out there, but that money is not designed for us. It's not coming to us. And so I think it's really critical to think about how we frame our issues in a way that we will have to work the system in a way as it is. I'm more of a, shut down the system kind of girl. But in this role, I've realized that the way philanthropy, for example, is set up, you will have, and I think, Angela, you were telling us, they will tell you that the money for your work is in the health pot. And they will tell you, go and look for the health pot, because the gender pot is so small, right? We have to make those articulations. When we're starting the work on child marriage, they would tell us, this is about family values. And we had to make the case. This is about education. This is about, health. It's, all of this. So we have to do a bit of case making. And a lot of what our work is as the feminist funds is not just to move the money, but also to influence the donor community to move the money differently and to adapt the money. So I'm looking, for example, at, and you speak about wellness, and we've spoken about wellness for activists, and who are the instruments and who are the leaders in the wellness sector. So Maria-Alix here is working with Heal by Hair, with the Heal by Hair Blue Mind Foundation project. So what they're doing is working with hairdressers, like literally the local hairdresser, and letting them being leaders in the wellness movement, right? If we look at the way the system and the ecosystem is shaped, the hairdressers are not even on the map, right? They're not on the map. Yet they have the access, they have the time. Like they do, listen, I did so much time doing this hair. Like the conversation we have, we can either gossip, or we can, if the person is trained. So what I'm saying is that if this is the work, what kind of discussion are we having with philanthropy about making this, like where is the money coming from for this? Making sure that these hairdressers, they don't just get trained, they get paid. Where's the money for that? It's just an example that I'm using just because Maria-Alix is sitting in front of me, just to say that we need to invest in the leadership. And the leadership, we need to invest it in a way that is indeed dignified. Thank you for using that word. Like we need to use, money dignifies, and it recognizes that your work is critical, and we need to value it as much. Yeah.
Angela. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting that you bring in that conversation. It's nice to see you, Dr. Stella. I think for me, one of the greatest things, I took a career break. Let me take it back. I took a career break 5 years ago to start this movement. And I did this because I'd seen for the longest time women and girls dying in childbirth. I'd seen so many issues that's around that. And I needed to understand why are they dying and why is nobody talking about it. When I got in, I was very excited, very energetic. I'd saved a few resources out of my work, and I was like, oh, everyone is going to come with me because this is a serious issue that is really impacting, and everyone is talking. Everywhere you go, whether it's WHA, whether you go to the World Health Assembly, whether you go to the UNGA and other places, you'll find people talking about it. I was really surprised because even as I tried to show the interconnectedness, as Francois was saying, people are not getting it. When I tell people that there's a link between a girl going to school and their maternal newborn health outcomes, people are like, no, go to education and look for the money there. Or when you try to tell them that, yes, we have a health facility in this slum, but women are not going there at night to deliver because there's insecurity, people will be like, oh, go to the local administration. So showcasing the differences was so hard for me. So at some point, I almost gave up. But then I remember talking to one of the people who had run a movement actually for environment, and she told me, you know what, Angela, passion does not put food on the table. And at the end of the day, volunteerism is only echoed in the Asian and African continent. You will never hear that from when you go to the minority world. And I was very shocked, and I was like, when you go to pitch and when you go to talk to donors, please make them understand that you have children that you need to feed, that you need to go to the salon and get your hair done, that you need to feel and look good and put food on the table. I can tell you it was not easy, but for 3 good years, I struggled with trying to navigate that, because how I am brought up is to think that people should just understand quite quickly what you're talking about. I learned to own my space, speak up and say no to that money if it's not taking care of the staff and the people that I work with. But how many people are able to do that? I think, as we sit here, we cannot leave Fulawe without discussing the challenges of movements. And one of them is actually, how do you sell that narrative to people to understand that this movement is glued together by people who are passionate to drive the agenda, but they can't do that when their babies are not going to school, when they are not able to actually be able to go to that health facility and get medication because they're busy taking care of other people. You can only give what you have. You can only pour from a cup that is full. And it gets a point where, and I now understand why stability and sustainability of movement is hard, because after some time you give up. You're like, you cannot continue. I need to get some job somewhere. I need to be able to take my children to school and the like. And so it's all of us coming together, whether it is the funders, whether it is the alliance members, whether it is the different people, to actually look at it and say, these people are put their lives on the line. They are pushing for this agenda. And for us to be able to support them, we need to ensure that they are thriving. Wherever they are, their children are okay. They are able to go to school. They are able to actually go to these places and not go sleep in a college room. Or I'm not saying that the college rooms are bad, or in some dormitory when the rest of the people are living in 5-star hotels and the like. We need to be able to acknowledge and appreciate that these people must be let to lead from their passion, to shape their own narratives, to share their own experiences, and then let's support those experiences so that they can be able to get the outcomes that we want to see at the end of the day. I keep saying at the end of the day, when we come to such gatherings, we want to see the best outcomes in the world. But we can only see that when we are interested and have invested interest in the interest of everyone who is driving that change. Whether you are driving it from some rural place in my country, Kenya, or whether you are sitting in some glass office somewhere in New York. At the end of the day, you are human, you have dignity, and that must be dignified at the end of the day. So as we leave this place, we must ask ourselves, how are we going to let movements thrive, remain sustainable, without just riding on one thing that you had that they have done in 1 year, and then in 2 years down the line, you come back and you realize that it's done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela.
So I'll say very briefly, for me, the question is not about where the money is, because I think for me it's an issue of how do we dismantle some of the colonial legacies that were left. For me as an African, I was never told about mental health issue. I was never told about self-care, because all I was told is you've got what, like just persevere until it goes further. And most of the organizations, they would not even put a self-care budget, because you think, what, we're taught to do with very little. And I think for me it was a colonial legacy. So it goes back to the issue around how do we dismantle the systemic injustices, and how do we address the root causes rather than the symptoms when it comes to, otherwise money is plenty. And you actually, sometimes money is good, but it's not all about money. Like now there are people doing things around friendship benches and all sorts of things that even in our pre-colonial times, mental health issues, from what I gathered, were not so many and you didn't need money. So I think for me it's the mindset.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, your last words, your parting words.
A very simple one.
Yes,
I
please.
think for me there is another aspect of money. It's how do we also work together and use our voice. I think sometimes we also are our own enemies, that we kind of go without really advocating for each other. So how do we use some of the platforms we have, some of the opportunities we have, and build strong partnerships so we can advocate for each other, because that's something we also don't do very well.
Phenomenal.
So, and then money is there. There's a lot of money in the world. But how do we partner and go for it?
Fantastic. Karen, any parting words?
My parting shot would be that each and every one of us is here because we care about the subject. We care about advancing women's engagement and women's participation. And I would say the work you're doing and that passion, that desire, it actually matters. You matter, your work matters. Keep at it. Do not tire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for this incredible panelist. Thank you so much, each one of you, for sharing with us from your wealth of experience and for contributing to this very rich discussion today. Really, it's just to really appreciate you and acknowledge the work that each one of you is doing on the continent to advance gender equity. Thank you so very much. And thank you to our amazing audience also for your attention and for listening and engaging. Thank you. I'll hand it back to the MC now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Folawe. Honestly, I think you must have all felt the passion, the lived experience these women have done and will continue to do incredibly on the continent. And I think equally your questions, your reflections, amazing. Thank you so much for the time spent this morning. Perhaps closing remarks from the CEO of AFWAC.
I'm sorry we're running behind time, but thank you so much, and hopefully these conversations will continue behind this room. I'm sure we've all heard that there are so many layers to this work, but thank you so much for coming, and we've got this room up until for the next hour, so if you guys want to connect, engage, feel free to do that, but thank you so much for coming.